What if the eating pattern that millions of men have adopted to lose weight, to feel better, to live longer is actually doing something to their testosterone that almost nobody is talking about? Not something small, not something theoretical, something measurable, biological, and happening right now inside the bodies of men who fast every single day believing they are optimizing their health while a critical hormonal shift is quietly unfolding beneath the surface. Intermittent fasting is everywhere right now. It is on every podcast, in every fitness app recommended by trainers, celebrated by biohackers, and practiced by men who are genuinely trying to do the right thing for their bodies. But here's the question that almost never gets asked and the one we are answering completely today. What is intermittent fasting actually doing to your testosterone? Is it helping? Is it hurting? And does it depend on how you do it? Stay with me because the real connection between intermittent fasting and testosterone is far more nuanced, far more important, and far more actionable than anything you have heard about this topic before. I'm Dr. Christine Rodriguez, and this is Men's Vitality Hub, the channel where we go past the headlines, past the trending wellness advice, and deep into the biology of what is actually happening inside men like you. I have spent years working with men who were doing everything right on paper, fasting, training, eating clean, and still struggling with fatigue, low drive, and hormonal decline. And intermittent fasting was often a piece of that puzzle that nobody had examined carefully enough. Today, we will examine it fully. Before we go any further, I want to tell you exactly what this video is going to give you because I want you to stay until the very end, and I promise every section is worth your time. First, I'm going to explain what intermittent fasting actually does inside the body at the hormonal level, the real biology, not the simplified version. Then I am going to walk you through the specific benefits of intermittent fasting for testosterone, the ones that are real, documented, and significant. Then I am going to be completely honest with you about the side effects and the risks because yes, fasting done the wrong way can actually suppress testosterone rather than support it. Then I am going to tell you exactly who should be careful with intermittent fasting, specific conditions where this practice can backfire hormonally. And finally, and this is the part most fasting content never gives you, I am going to show you step by step, in precise practical detail, exactly how men like you should structure intermittent fasting to maximize testosterone benefits and avoid the hormonal pitfalls. Every section matters, do not skip ahead. Let's start with what intermittent fasting actually is and what it does inside your body from the moment your eating window closes. Intermittent fasting is not a diet in the traditional sense. It does not prescribe what you eat. It prescribes when you eat. The most widely practiced form is the 16.8 protocol, 16 hours of fasting followed by an 8-hour eating window. Other common variations include the 18.6, the 20.4, and the more extreme one-meal-a-day approach, known as OMAD. During the fasting window, no calories are consumed. Water, black coffee, and plain tea are generally considered acceptable without breaking the fast. Now here is what happens inside your body the moment your eating window closes, and this is where the hormonal story begins. In the first few hours after your last meal, blood glucose and insulin levels fall. Insulin, the hormone produced by the pancreas in response to food, particularly carbohydrates, is one of the most important regulators of the hormonal environment in a man's body. Chronically elevated insulin, which is the reality for men who eat frequently throughout the day and consume significant amounts of refined carbohydrates, is directly associated with reduced testosterone production and increased sex hormone binding globulin SHBG, the protein that binds testosterone and makes it biologically unavailable. As insulin drops during the fasting window, this suppressive effect begins to lift. The hormonal environment starts to shift in a direction that is more favorable for testosterone activity. Between hours 4 and 8 of fasting, the body completes its transition from glucose as the primary fuel source to fat oxidation. Stored fat begins to be broken down into fatty acids and ketone bodies. This metabolic shift has profound implications for hormonal health, because the reduction in visceral fat that results from sustained intermittent fasting practice directly reduces aromatase activity. Aromatase, as men like you who follow this channel know, is the enzyme produced predominantly in fat tissue that converts testosterone into estrogen. Less visceral fat means less aromatase activity, which means less testosterone being converted away and more remaining available for the tissues that need it. Between hours 10 and 16, something particularly relevant happens when growth hormone secretion increases significantly. Research has documented that fasting periods of 12 to 16 hours can produce growth hormone surges of 200 to 2,000% above baseline. Growth hormone is not testosterone, but it works synergistically with testosterone to support muscle preservation, fat metabolism, and cellular repair. For men whose growth hormone output has declined with age, the growth hormone stimulation of regular fasting represents a meaningful anabolic benefit that compounds with the testosterone supportive effects of the practice. Still with me? Good. Because now, let's talk about the specific documented benefits of intermittent fasting for testosterone. And these are real, they are research-backed, and they matter. The first benefit is insulin sensitivity improvement, and this is arguably the most important testosterone-related benefit that fasting provides. A study published in the journal Obesity found that men who practiced intermittent fasting showed significant improvements in insulin sensitivity compared to men who ate continuously throughout the day, even when total caloric intake was identical. Why does this matter for testosterone? Because insulin resistance, the condition in which cells become less responsive to insulin signal, is one of the most powerful drivers of testosterone suppression in men. Research published in Diabetes Care found a direct, inverse relationship between insulin resistance and free testosterone levels. As insulin sensitivity improves through regular fasting practice, the hormonal environment for testosterone production becomes progressively more favorable. The second benefit is the reduction of visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that is both a product of and a driver of hormonal imbalance in men. Multiple studies have documented that intermittent fasting is particularly effective at reducing visceral fat compared to continuous caloric restriction, even when total calories consumed are similar. A clinical trial published in the journal Cell Metabolism found that men practicing time-restricted eating lost significantly more visceral fat than a control group eating the same number of calories across a longer daily window. As visceral fat declines, aromatase activity decreases, estrogen conversion of testosterone slows, and free testosterone levels improve. This is a hormonal feedback loop that works in your favor, and intermittent fasting is one of the most effective dietary strategies for initiating it. The third benefit is the direct stimulation of luteinizing hormone pulsatility. LH, the pituitary hormone that signals the testes to produce testosterone, is released in pulses throughout the day. Research has shown that short-term fasting enhances the amplitude and frequency of LH pulses, which translates directly into increased testosterone production by the Leydig cells. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism documented that men who fasted showed significantly increased LH pulse amplitude compared to fed conditions, a finding with direct implications for testosterone output. The fourth benefit is the reduction of systemic inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation driven by poor diet, excess body fat, sedentary behavior, and chronic stress directly suppresses testosterone production by interfering with the HPT axis and impairing Leydig cell function. Research has consistently shown that intermittent fasting reduces key inflammatory markers including C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha in men who practice it consistently. As inflammation decreases, the hormonal environment becomes less hostile to testosterone production. The Leydig cells function more efficiently. The HPT axis communicates more clearly, and testosterone output reflects that improvement. Now, and this is the part that most intermittent fasting content completely skips, let's talk honestly about the side effects and the risks. Because intermittent fasting is not universally beneficial for testosterone. Done incorrectly, it can actively suppress it. The first and most significant risk is excessive caloric restriction combined with fasting. This is the mistake that men like you who are highly motivated to lose weight or lean out are most likely to make. When the fasting window is combined with significant caloric restriction during the eating window, when a man is both fasting for 16 hours and then eating far too little when the window opens, the body enters a state of energy deficit severe enough to trigger the starvation response. In this state, the body interprets the caloric shortage as a survival threat and begins to downregulate non-essential functions. Testosterone production, which requires energy, cholesterol, and nutritional raw materials, is one of the first systems to be throttled. Research on severely calorie-restricted diets has documented testosterone reductions of 20 to 40% in men who combine excessive fasting with insufficient eating. The message is clear: intermittent fasting works for testosterone when the eating window contains adequate calories and nutrition. It backfires when fasting becomes a vehicle for near starvation. The second risk is elevated cortisol from extended or aggressive fasting protocols. As the fast extends beyond 16 hours, particularly into the 20-hour and OMED territory, cortisol levels begin to rise significantly as the body mobilizes stored energy through cortisol-driven gluconeogenesis. And as we have discussed extensively on this channel, cortisol and testosterone are direct hormonal antagonists. The pregnenolone steal, the competition between cortisol and testosterone for the same precursor molecule, means that aggressive fasting-driven cortisol elevation can suppress testosterone production meaningfully. For men who are already under significant psychological stress, aggressive fasting protocols add a biological stress load on top of an already elevated cortisol baseline with predictable hormonal consequences. The third risk is disruption of sleep-related testosterone production. Some men, in an attempt to maximize their fasting window, skip breakfast and push their eating window into the evening, eating their first meal at noon and their last meal at 8 p.m. The problem with this pattern is that eating a large meal close to bedtime elevates insulin, raises core body temperature, and activates digestive processes that fragment sleep and reduce deep sleep quality. Since the majority of daily testosterone is produced during deep sleep, anything that compromises sleep architecture compromises testosterone production. For men like you who are serious about hormonal optimization, the timing of the eating window relative to sleep is not a minor detail, it is a critical variable. Now let's talk about who should be particularly careful with intermittent fasting, because for certain men, this practice carries specific hormonal risks that need to be understood before starting. Men who are already dealing with clinically low testosterone should approach intermittent fasting with caution and ideally under medical supervision. When testosterone is already significantly suppressed, the additional metabolic stress of fasting can deepen the deficiency. The caloric and nutritional demands of testosterone synthesis, cholesterol, zinc, vitamin D, adequate protein need to be reliably met within the eating window, which requires careful nutritional planning that many men do not implement. Men with a history of disordered eating or obsessive restriction patterns should be cautious with structured fasting protocols, as the rigid eating window can reinforce restrictive behaviors and create a relationship with food that is psychologically harmful and ultimately hormonally damaging through the mechanisms of excessive caloric restriction described above. Men with adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction characterized by chronically elevated or dysregulated cortisol, persistent exhaustion, and difficulty recovering from stress may find that the cortisol demands of extended fasting worsen their adrenal burden rather than support their hormonal recovery. For these men, supporting adrenal function and cortisol regulation needs to come before implementing fasting protocols. Men who are engaged in high-volume, high-intensity athletic training need to be particularly thoughtful about fasting timing relative to training. Training in a fasted state, while it does have some metabolic benefits for fat oxidation, significantly elevates cortisol during the session and can compromise muscle protein synthesis in men who do not consume adequate protein and calories in close proximity to their training window. Now the section you have been waiting for. Exactly how to use intermittent fasting to maximize testosterone benefits while avoiding every one of the pitfalls I just described. This is the practical roadmap. Follow it carefully. The first step is choosing the right fasting protocol for your hormonal goals. For men like you whose primary goal is testosterone optimization alongside the metabolic benefits of fasting, the 16.8 protocol is the sweet spot. It is long enough to produce the insulin sensitivity improvements, the LH pulse enhancement, and the growth hormone stimulation that benefit testosterone, and short enough to avoid the excessive cortisol elevation and caloric restriction risk that longer fasting windows create. Start with a 14-10 window of 16.8 feels too aggressive initially, particularly if you are new to fasting or if you are training intensively. Extend to 16.8 once the practice feels sustainable and your energy levels are stable. The second step is timing your eating window correctly relative to your sleep and training schedule. The optimal eating window for men who prioritize testosterone and sleep quality opens in the morning or midday and closes at least 3 hours before bed. A window of 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. or noon to 8 p.m. allows adequate food intake during the day while ensuring that digestion is largely complete before sleep, protecting the deep sleep stages where testosterone production is most active. If you train in the morning, shift your window earlier, open at 10 a.m., close by 6 p.m. so that post-training nutrition falls within the eating window and muscle protein synthesis is supported immediately after training. The third step is building your eating window around testosterone-supportive nutrition, because the quality and composition of what you eat during your eating window determines whether fasting enhances or undermines your hormonal health. Your eating window must contain adequate total calories, not a dramatic deficit. A moderate deficit of 300 to 500 calories below maintenance is appropriate for men who are trying to reduce visceral fat. More than that, and you risk triggering the starvation response that suppresses testosterone. Protein intake should be high, a minimum of 7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, distributed across your meals within the eating window to support muscle protein synthesis and provide the amino acid building blocks for hormonal health. Dietary fat must be adequate, at minimum 30% of total calories from fat, with emphasis on saturated and monounsaturated sources like eggs, red meat, olive oil, avocado, and fatty fish. Remember that testosterone is synthesized from cholesterol, and dietary fat is what provides the cholesterol and the hormonal raw materials your Leydig cells need. Zinc-rich foods, oysters, beef, pumpkin seeds, and vitamin D-rich foods, fatty fish, egg yolks, liver should be consistent features of your eating window. The fourth step is managing your training relative to your fasting window. Training in a fully fasted state, particularly resistance training, elevates cortisol significantly and can compromise testosterone acutely. For hormonal optimization, training should ideally occur 1 to 2 hours after opening your eating window so that you have some fuel on board, or in the late afternoon when cortisol is naturally lower. If morning fasted training is unavoidable due to your schedule, consume 10 to 15 grams of essential amino acids or a small amount of protein before training. This is sufficient to blunt the cortisol-driven muscle breakdown of fasted resistance training without meaningfully breaking the metabolic benefits of the fast. The fifth step is monitoring your response, because intermittent fasting affects men differently depending on their baseline hormonal status, their stress levels, their sleep quality, and their overall nutritional status. After 4 to 6 weeks of consistent intermittent fasting, pay attention to the following signals. If your energy is improving, your body composition is shifting favorably, your sleep is deep and restorative, and your drive and motivation are stable or improving, your fasting protocol is working for your hormonal health. If you are experiencing persistent fatigue, declining libido, increased irritability, disrupted sleep, or difficulty recovering from training, these are signs that your fasting protocol may be creating a caloric deficit that is too aggressive, a cortisol burden that is too high, or a nutritional insufficiency that is impairing testosterone production. Adjust accordingly, shorten the fasting window, increase caloric intake within the eating window, or shift the window earlier in the day. If you want objective data, get a comprehensive hormone panel: total testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, LH, FSH, cortisol, insulin, and vitamin D before starting intermittent fasting, and again after 8 to 12 weeks of consistent practice. The numbers will tell you clearly whether your protocol is supporting or undermining your hormonal health. This is the most powerful tool available for personalized hormonal optimization, and it removes the guesswork entirely. Let me bring everything together now, because I want you to leave this video with a clear, complete picture of what intermittent fasting really means for men like you and your testosterone. Intermittent fasting done correctly is one of the most powerful dietary strategies available for creating a hormonal environment that supports testosterone production. It improves insulin sensitivity, reduces visceral fat, enhances LH pulsatility, stimulates growth hormone, and reduces the chronic inflammation that suppresses testosterone. These are real, documented, significant benefits. But intermittent fasting done incorrectly, with excessive restriction, aggressive fasting windows, poor nutritional composition in the eating window, or mistimed relative to sleep and training, can suppress testosterone meaningfully and undermine the very hormonal health men are trying to protect. The difference between these two outcomes is not luck or genetics. It is knowledge. It is the understanding of the biology that we walked through today, and now you have that understanding. Now you know what the real connection between intermittent fasting and testosterone actually is, and exactly how to make it work in your favor. Imagine this: 2 men start intermittent fasting on the same day. Man A skips breakfast, eats his first meal at noon, trains fasted in the morning, eats a large dinner at 9 p.m., and keeps his calories low because he wants to lose weight fast. 6 weeks later, he is tired, his libido is lower, his sleep is restless, and his testosterone, if he tested it, would tell a story of suppression. Man B opens his eating window at 11 a.m., trains at noon with some protein on board, eats 2 well-constructed testosterone-supportive meals by 7 p.m., and hits his calorie target consistently. 6 weeks later, his body composition has improved, his energy is up, his sleep is deeper, and his testosterone reflects the biology of a man whose hormonal system has been given exactly what it needs. Same practice, completely different outcomes. The difference is structure. The difference is knowledge. Fasting is not a punishment for past eating. It is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how you use it. Men like you who take the time to understand the biology, who implement the right protocol, eat the right foods in the right window, time their training intelligently, and monitor their response. Those men get to experience what intermittent fasting genuinely has to offer for hormonal health, and it is significant, it is real, and it is available to you starting with your very next meal. What you eat matters. When you eat matters just as much. Master both and your hormones will follow. If this video gave you the complete picture you have been missing on intermittent fasting and testosterone, if you are going to restructure your eating window after watching this, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to Men's Vitality Hub. Every single week, this is what we do. Real biology, real science, real practical guidance for men who are serious about their hormonal health, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Are you currently practicing intermittent fasting? What protocol are you using? And have you noticed any changes in your energy, your performance, or your body composition since starting? Drop your experience below, because your answer might be exactly what helps another man in this community figure out whether fasting is working for him or against him. Thank you for watching. Eat well, time it right. I will see you in the next one.